visceral, the effects of visceral last from 4 to 6 hours. So they gave him visceral. They did no x-rays. They did no other kind of exploratory treatment, and they sent him back to jail. In the meantime, his brain began to swell and bleed internally, and the brain swelled so big until it fell onto his, what they call the brain stem. And the brain stem is where the respiratory functions are housed, and my dad suffocated to death. So, as I said, visceral is called hydroxyzine, and so they had to make up a story. The cover story was that Daddy came back to jail, he was crazy, and he was jumping off bunks, turning flips, doing all that kind of stuff, and raising a ruckus, and it was an inmate that killed him, because he was raising a ruckus. Doesn't matter, he was in the city jail, somebody killed him. Okay, but it's important to think about the visceral and the 4 to 6 hour time period that the effects of visceral last. So, fact is, my dad was probably not fully conscious from being at the hospital and getting this medication. He probably woke sometime near midnight with a terrific headache and began to try to get the guard's attention to get the help that he needed. In the meantime, like I said, his brain began to swell. Now, he was taken back to the hospital. He finally fell unconscious again, and paramedics were called, CPR was given. He was taken back to Erlangen around 2 a.m. and hospital suspected brain death, and he never regained consciousness. He was declared dead on December 6, 1983. And because my father was the 5th black man to have died in custody of the police in a 2-year period of time, there was a huge uproar in the black community. There was an initial autopsy that was performed by County Medical Examiner Jack Adams, and that jail was closed down that day. The jail was closed down. There were 2 witnesses that were sent to Pennsylvania. There were other people in the jail were sent to different jails all over the county and different parts of the state. Now, I suppose because of the death of other people in custody, there was a suspicion that the county medical examiner would not perform an unbiased investigation, so the community asked for a second autopsy. And this one was commissioned by the community and was performed by Dr. Joseph Burton of Atlanta. He was a board-certified forensic pathologist, according to Dr. Brooke, and had gained notoriety in the Atlanta child murder cases. Now, Dr. Jack Adams was a county medical examiner. He made his report, but he never was given a report by the police officers. And according to state law, he was supposed to do an investigation. He didn't do an investigation. Dr. Jack Adams said initially that my father died of skull fracture, but he refused to say. In other words, he gave the cause of death, but he refused to tell the manner of death. He refused to say how he got the fractured skull. Dr. Burton said that the injury was more like his head had been hit by something than hitting something. More like, in other words, somebody hit him with something. Okay, so because of these 2 autopsy reports, the differences, that's why this case has been stagnated all these years. And everybody's refused to move to get it off of this stalemate, okay? In the meantime, an elected official contacted the FBI after Dr. Brooks at that time was the president of Operation Push. Other people were involved in pushing the city commissioners to have an unbiased, independent investigation into this case. They had already had internal affairs investigation, and everything was, you know, unfounded. My dad was supposed to have killed himself by jumping off a 5-foot bunk. Okay, and so that because of this uproar in the community, Mayor Roberts, Gene Roberts, did call in the FBI, but according to some documents back there that were written by the city attorney's office, that FBI investigation was merely a verification of the internal affairs investigation. That's what they said. And if a judge asked, that's what the internal. So we have been duped all these years thinking that this was an unbiased, independent investigation, and all the FBI was called in to do was to verify the internal affairs investigation. So that's where we are here. Okay, as I said, an elected official contacted the FBI and retrieved documents, certain documents from the FBI to perform its own homicide investigation. That was not in 1985, after all these years of trying to get to the bottom of what happened here. First I need to say that in 1984, when the FBI was called into here, my mother filed suit in November 1984. The United States Attorney at that time was John C. Cook. And as soon as my mother filed suit on December 18, 1984, he made a determination, before there was an FBI, a complete FBI investigation, he made a determination that my father was not killed by any jail employee or any police officer. The FBI investigation was not going to be complete for another year. So how he was going to make that determination. It was all about protecting the officials and the police officers here in the city of Chattanooga, protecting the city's treasury, and the people, you know, they can die. Who cares? That's what's happened here. So, in August of 1984, Annie Thomas and I went to what we call a Human Day conference. It was in Springfield, not Springfield, but Young Springs, Ohio. And Human Day stands for Help Us Make a Nation. At that time, I met Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till Mobley, whose son was beaten and thrown in the Tallahatchie River in 1954, and it's been so bad until she wanted to have an open casket to so people could see what had really happened to her son. Her son was 14 years old, and he was accused of whistling at a white woman in Money, Mississippi. He lived in Chicago, and he came to visit in the summertime with his people in Money, Mississippi. And he wound up being tortured all night long, had a millstone or some sort of fan tied around his neck and thrown, beaten, and shot through the head and thrown in the river. Well, 3 days after he was thrown in the river, his body surfaced. But the people in Mississippi wanted to bury his body to keep people from knowing and keep people from seeing what's going on. That's sort of, not literally, but figuratively. And that's what they've done here in the city of Chattanooga about these cases of police brutality. They want to bury it. You know, they want to keep people from knowing the truth and keep people from knowing that we all have a responsibility to make sure this kind of stuff never happens again, or stop it. So, in August of 1984, we started some prayer vigils in front of the city jail. The first thing that happened after that Tom Kennedy, who was the Commissioner of Fire and Police and also an elected official, he outlawed the slapstick, saying that it was only used to hit people in the head. And we did that every Wednesday night for 2 years. And during these 2 years, no one was killed in police custody. Now, our trial started in April 1986 and went on for about a week. And the verdict was that the police were not liable, and there was a mistrial against the city, which was later dismissed. But 30 days after the trial ended, another man was killed in police custody while effecting arrest, while the police were effecting arrest. And we began keeping records of deaths in custody, and our list is called the body count. Now, my father's commemoration was in 2003, the 20th commemoration. At that time, we had 47 people on that list. And now we have 61 people on the list in the back here. And that's only been like 8 years ago. From the time 1980 to 2003, there was 47. Since that time, it's almost been another 20 people who's been killed in custody of the police. I met with John Conyers in Mississippi one year. and I gave him a copy of our body count. He went back to Washington. He put up some bills, and one of them was the Death in Custody Act that he tried to put up, and then that became law some years later, where every prison official, every jail, every county jail is supposed to keep a record of the number of people who are killed in their custody. They just gotta know who's been who's dying in jails here. So I think that's progress, you know. Like I said, we then began to research to change the form of government. That was in we started in 1986. We filed a voting rights lawsuit in 1987, right after the Klan had decided they were gonna protest in the city of Chattanooga and stand up for the police department. That's where they were standing. And we won that lawsuit in 1989. In 1990, a new government was ushered in Chattanooga, and we had an opportunity for real representation for the first time since the Reconstruction era. And there were 4 blacks who were elected to serve on a 9-member city council. Okay, and the Suttles case, my father's death, was put back on the back burner and only became a point of political contention other than something involving human rights that could be fought and won.